Shalom to the 12 tribes. Greetings to you who are scattered overseas. Greetings to you in the name of Yahusha, Alahim. Right, this evening, I want to touch base upon a very important subject where we stand today in understanding Matthew chapter 24 and the signs of the times. We know that we are in the end days, and if you see, when the first sermon of Kepha or Peter was that in the last days I'll pour out my ruach upon all flesh. So the last days began after the Ruach HaKodesh came down upon the assembly. Okay, so we are in the last times where we are seeing the signs of the times, and it's very important that we understand Matthew chapter 24 in the right perspective. So when we read Matthew chapter 24, we see it is the most misunderstood and misinterpreted chapter, because people have interpreted it fleshly to show the events mentioned in it. So we hear all sorts of things as a secret rapture, one world antichrist or anti-messiah, world war, pandemic. So they interpret these passages to look at in this way. So while people crossed over to the Hebrew movement, while it was accomplished text looking back at AD 70, when Rome destroyed the Jewish temple and the Jews scattered to the ends of the earth, yet others of these Hebrew and Christian denominations believe 1948 as a gathering back of the Jews to the land, where they would build a third temple where the Antichrist or Anti-Messiah will be sitting ruling. And then Matthew 24 events begin inserting the millennium rule of 1000 years of Mashiach Yahusha. So all these kinds of things I've heard over the period of years in my walk with Mashiach. Right? So while we won't get into what people believe, we must visit the verses in open-mindedness to see and decode the text to understand the signs of the time. So please note that verse by verse will not be covered in this study, but I will make sure a foundation is laid so that the next time you read these passages, you would get a clarity on the current signs of times, taking place in comparison with scripture. So we begin the chapter right where the disciples they show Yahusha the buildings of the temple. So in Matthew chapter 24 verses 1 and 2, and Yahusha went out from the temple to go on his way, and his disciples approached him to show him the buildings of the temple. And Yahusha answered and said to them, "Do you see all these things? Truly I say to you, there shall not remain here one stone upon another that shall not be torn down." So we begin by understanding the disciples approached Yahusha to show him the buildings of the temple. The buildings, plural, is referred to as the domes inside the two gates of the temple mount, the place the Herod made for Mikveh, because this was a Herodic temple, the outbuildings, the courts, etc. So Yahusha says not one stone will be left upon the other. Its destruction completely with no temple shows the reference was to the second temple and not the third temple, which is not yet built. All right. So many people are talking about the third temple. Matthew 24 is a summary or an explanation or expounding of the destruction of the third temple. It's related to the second temple. But again, when we proceed on, all right, it's a parabolic language where it shows us the actual destruction that is going to happen. Okay, so please bear with me while I bring the scriptures to the table. All right, Matthew 24 verses 3, he sat down on the Mount of Olives. His disciples approached him alone and said, "Tell us, please, when shall this be? And what is the sign of your coming and the sign of the end of the age?" All right. So the destruction of the second temple, which happened in AD 70, is not the end of the age, and it was not the sign of his coming. All right. Because if Yahusha would have come in AD 70, then what are we doing here on earth? Why is the earth still progressing day and night, winter and summer, and there's no clue, no aim for us to be here upon this earth. Okay, so the disciples asked him the sign of his coming and the sign of the end of the age. So this is where the confusion lies, because Yahusha spoke of a series of events pinpointing to the signs of his nearness and the end of the age. So to understand the end of the age, the Hebrew words are 𝒮𝒃𝓃, right? Where ket H7093 means process of time, end, farther, later, after, and olam means forever, of old, everlasting, perpetual. Okay, so the Greek words are santelia G4930, which means consummation, entire completion, end of a dispensation, and Aeon G165 means ever, world, ages, course. So both the Hebrew and the Greek words show us that the disciples asked Yahusha the latter course summing up to the end. All right. So what are the events that will happen summing up to the coming of Mashiach? So that is what the question was, if you understand and compare these two words in these verses. Right? So they were asking for a sign, the sign of his coming, and the sign of a latter course summing up to the end. And Yahusha answered and said to them, verse 4, Matthew 24, verse 4, beware lest anyone misleads you. Verse 5, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am he, that is Mashiach, and they shall mislead many. So the sign would begin when many shall come, showing an exposition of who the Mashiach is. They would misrepresent him. It doesn't mean that someone would come and claim saying that I am Mashiach. No, they would say this is Mashiach, means I am he, as a misrepresenting who he is, not identifying his true divinity or his true office that he occupies as Elohim, right, in the new creation order. So it doesn't mean someone who would claim that he himself is Mashiach, from where we see Christianity and Hebrew circles teaching that one man ruling anti-Messiah doctrine, referring to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, where Shaul the emissary speaks explicitly of the man of sin to be revealed, the son of destruction. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verses 1 and 2, behold, we ask you, my brothers, with regard to the coming of our Adon Yahusha HaMashiach and our gathering together to him, that is not quickly to be shaken in knowledge, and that is not to be alarmed, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter, such as the extension from us saying, the day of Mashiach has come. Verse 3, let no man in any way deceive you, for it shall not come unless the falling away is to come first, and the man of sin is to be revealed, the son of destruction or perdition. All right, the word son is ben in Hebrew. The word for destruction is Abaddon, and the Greek word for destruction is apolia. All right. So verse 4, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called Al, or that is served, for he also sits in the temple of Elohim, as Elohim, presenting himself that he is Elohim. So firstly, Shaul the emissary is also speaking about the time of the coming of our Adon Yahusha and a gathering together to him, which will not happen until the falling away comes first. So this is where we need to identify. So he is warning the assembly that some people have already said that the day of Mashiach has come. No, it will not come. Do not believe anyone, because that day will not come until the falling away comes first, and the man of sin, that is the man of perdition, is revealed. So we saw the word, right, Abaddon and apolia, all right, which is, if you see Revelation chapter 9, all right, I spoke in my previous study, the bottomless pit, all right, the word there is actually interpreted as deep well, all right, and that bottomless pit or that deep well had a king over them whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek his name is Apollyon. All right, so this apolia is rooted in the word Apollyon. Okay, so Shaul is referring to the end time assemblies and not to a second or third Jewish temple. Remember, in Revelation 9 speaks of the deep well from which the hordes of Sheol came, darkening the sun, and that deep well had a king over them whose name is in Hebrew is Abaddon, and Greek name is Apollyon. So 2 Thessalonians 2:3, Apolia is rooted in Apollyon, where Apolia means destruction and Apollyon means destroyer. And this is in reference to Hashatan and people occupying the place that has been handed over to him. Hence, Saul represents him as the man of sin who says, I am he that is Mashiach, as stated in Matthew chapter 24, verses 5. Because wherever Mashiach, Yahusha, Elohim is misrepresented, so it is a clear indication that that Mashiach that is preached over there is none other than Hashatan, who has taken over that place, because he is not the true Mashiach that those people in that assembly are believing in. So Yahusha said, unless you believe I am he, you will die in your sins. John chapter 8 verses 24. Okay, this is Revelation 9 verses 11, where it says they have a king over them, the messenger of the abyss. In Hebrew, his name is Abaddon, and in Greek, he has a name Apollyon. Okay, let's move to Matthew chapter 24 verses 6 and 7. But you shall untimely hear of wars and hearing of wars. Beware lest you become alarmed, for surely all of this shall happen, but it is still not the end. For one nation shall rise against another nation, and one kingdom against another kingdom, and there shall be famine and disease and earthquakes here and there. Okay, so the Hebrew word for here is shama, right? Shama means hear, right? And shamot means hearing. Now they have translated, but you shall ultimately hear of wars and rumors of wars. So they have translated shamot, right? Shamot as rumors. Okay, the Greek word there is akho, G189. All right, so like I said, shama means hear. The Greek word akko and akao, that is G191, also means hearing. So the correct translation should be, but you shall ultimately hear of wars and hearing of wars, right? Because it does not make sense in English, all right, they translate it as rumors of wars. Okay, so hearing of war. Okay, so that's actually what it means, war of wars. Okay, so war and hearing of war. So the Hebrew word for war is milkama, right? See this here, milkama, H4421, and it is from the word root word which has in it H3898, which is lakham, which means to fight. All right, lakham means to fight, and the same word lakham, or they say in Hebrew lechem, when you add vowel points, it means bread, right? So it's so interesting. Milkhama has the root word lakham, which means fight, and lakham also means bread without the vowel points. But because the word they have to formulate a language, so they say lechem, which means bread. Okay, but the spelling is the same. The only thing they add vowel points, dots or dashes to pronounce it as lechem, so that people identify, oh, I'm talking about bread and I'm not talking about war, or I'm not talking about fighting. Okay, so that's what it means. So hence we understand it spiritually as the war of breads. All right, it's a war of breads, war of war. Okay, a physical and a spiritual bread. Now you will say, brother, you're spiritualizing the text. But look at the next verse, which will define what I'm saying. So when you read verse 7, it says, for one nation shall rise against another nation, and one kingdom shall against another kingdom, and there shall be famine and disease and earthquakes here and there. So when you turn to Genesis chapter 25 verses 22 and 23, all right, it says, but the children struggled together in a womb, and she said, if it is so, why then am I this way? So she went to inquire of Yahuwah. So this is talking about Rebecca. Okay, verse 23, Yahuwah said to her, two nations are in your womb, and two peoples shall be separated from your body, and one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the older shall serve the younger. So wasn't Rebecca told that two nations are in a womb, as she went to inquire after she had a terrible experience of the children struggling in a womb? So who were the two nations? Esau and Jacob. So we all know the story of Esau selling his birthright to Jacob for a morsel of food and termed as a fornicator. in Hebrews chapter 12 verses 16, because fornication is sinning against one's own body. 1 Corinthians 6:18, keep away from the fornication. Every sin that a man commits is outside the body, but he that commits fornication sins against his own body. Verse 19, or do you not know that your body is the temple of the Ruach HaKodesh dwelling in you, whom you have from Elohim, and that you are not that is of your own. So the sinning against own body is related to the firstborn blessing which Esau despised and lost it to Jacob. For misrepresentation of Mashiach Yahusha is despising him and his firstborn blessing, and this would term you as a fornicator. Coming back to Matthew chapter 24 text, the prophecy is related to the latter course, summing up to the end, giving an example of the second temple destruction. So the language is parabolic, all right? Verse 8, Matthew 24 verse 8, but all these things are only the beginning of birth pangs. So the war of bread, which is the physical versus spiritual, and the two nations rising against each other, again physical versus spiritual, all sum up to birth pangs. So the covenant Yasharel, depicted as being clothed with the sun, moon under her feet and crown of 12 stars, as we read in Revelation 12 verses 1, was seen in birth pangs or giving birth to the man-child. So the Hebrew word for birth pangs is 𝒮𝒹𝒃. Right? 𝒮𝒹 is the same word used in Revelation chapter 2 verses 2, translated as birth pangs. And so is the Greek word odinon and odino, which is 𝒮𝒽5604 and 𝒮𝒽5605, used both in Matthew chapter 24 verses 8 and Revelation chapter 12 verses 2, all right, where it says, and she is being with child, cried out in birth pangs and in agony of giving birth. Galatians 4:19, my children with whom I travail in birth pangs, again that same Hebrew word 𝒮𝒹𝒃, Greek word odino, 𝒮𝒽5605, until Mashiach is formed in you. So Shaul the emissary has the travailing in his soul as birth pangs, all right, until Mashiach is formed in the disciples, in the Talmudim. Not only Shaul the emissary, even we have that same yearning of Mashiach being formed in us, where we grow to a full stature of him. So Yahusha says, these are the beginning of birth pangs, pointing to the womb from where the baby is nourished, and at the same time in struggle with the other twin in the womb. We saw two nations are in the womb, right? So there is a struggle between the two twins in the womb. So then in Matthew 24, Yahusha Adon lets us know that for his sake, his disciples will be hated, killed, many will stumble, many will betray his neighbor, man will hate his brother, false prophets will arise and mislead many, love of many will grow cold, but he who endures to the end will be saved. He also lets us know that the end will come only after the good news of the kingdom shall be proclaimed in all the earth as a testimony to all the nations. Matthew chapter 24, 13 to 15. But the one who endures until the time of the end, he shall be saved. Verse 14. And this good news of the kingdom shall be proclaimed in all the earth as a testimony to all the nations, and afterward the end shall come. Verse 15. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken by Daniel the prophet, standing in the set apart place, let the reader understand. Alright, so the end will not come until the good news is proclaimed in all the earth as a testimony to the nations. Okay, so and then he speaks about the abomination of desolation, which was spoken by Daniel the prophet. So now let's look at the abomination of desolation as understood in the right perspective. All right, so keep this in mind. Verse 15 says, let the reader understand. Okay, and when we turn to verse 16, it says, let the men who are in Yehuda flee to the mountains. Yehuda means Judah. Okay, verse 17, and whoever is on the field must not enter to get anything from his house. Verse 18, and let him who is in the field not turn back to carry away his garment. So many interpret abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet to mean as stated in the book of Maccabees, where the abominable image was set up by Antiochus 𝒮𝒃, Greek ruler, all right, who was a Greek ruler inside the temple. As a result, the daily sacrifices were stopped until the temple was rededicated and cleansed. So this has historically taken place before the birth of Yahusha, but Yahusha is showing us it in a futuristic prophecy which needs to be understood as Matthew 24:15 says, let the reader understand. So hence we must understand the prophecy based on a latter course summing up to the end. Furthermore, Yahusha says in verse 16 of Matthew 24, then let the men who are in Yehuda or Judea flee to the mountains. So this will not make sense if you are positionally believing that the abomination of desolation event took place around 165 years before Mashiach was born in this world. It will also not make sense to believe that it spoke of the Herod's temple, which was destroyed by the Romans in AD 70. That is after Mashiach. It doesn't sum up because the temple veil was torn when Mashiach died, indicating that Elohim is no longer dwelling in man-made temple. The new covenant states we are the temple of Elohim and his Ruach dwells in us. Hence, we must understand it in a futuristic perspective as the emissaries or the apostles warned of the falling away which will come ahead after they are dead. So if Yehuda in Matthew chapter 24 verses 16 has to be taken literally, if you literally believe that those in Judea flee to the mountains, then what about all those beyond the Jordan or in Galilee who also believed in Yahusha, and those in the Decapolis where they have to flee? So where will they flee? All right, if you literally take Yehuda, so didn't Yahusha say that, but after I rise, I shall go ahead of you to Galilee? All right, the messenger also at when he was raised, he told the Talmudim at the grave that go quickly and tell his disciples that he has risen from the dead, and behold, he is going ahead of you into the Galilee, and there you shall see him. Behold, I have told you. Matthew 28 verse 7. Verse 10, Yahusha said to them, Matthew 28 verse 10, Yahusha said to them, do not fear, go and tell my brethren to go on to the Galilee or Galilee, and there they shall see me. And Shaul refers in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verses 6, after that he was seen by over more than 500 brothers, referring to the place in Galilee where the 500 brethren saw Yahusha. All right. So hence Yehuda has to be understood as a tribe from which Adon Yahusha himself sprang from with the Melchizedek priesthood, and we identify in that tribe. All right, because we are in the Melchizedek priesthood. Okay, so fleeing to the mountains is a synonym used as a figurative of scattering. So this is also synonymous with Revelation chapter 12 verses 6, where the covenant Yasharal woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared by Elohim, where she would be nourished for 1260 days. Okay, now this is very interesting. If you divide 1260 days by 30 days, we arrive at 42 months. So what is the significance of 42 months? Revelation chapter 12 verses 6, we read, and the woman fled into the wilderness in which she had a place there prepared by Elohim. So she would be nourished there for 1260 days. So how did we arrive to 42 months? 1260 divided by 30 lunar days, where Yahuwah or who's our Yahusha, right, is using the Jewish calendar to define that it is the same period of 42 months. Okay, so what is the significance of 42 months? Revelation chapter 11 verses 2. You leave out the court which is outside the temple and do not measure it, for it has been given to the Gentiles, and they shall trample the set apart spirit for 42 months. Set apart city, sorry. And they shall trample the set apart city for 42 months. All right. So this is the same time period. All you need is wisdom from the Ruach to identify these numbers. All right. So when measuring the Ruach temple, the messenger told John or Yahukanan to leave out the court outside the temple and not measure it, as it has been given to the Gentiles to trample for 42 months. This is the same period the covenant Yasharal is nourished in the wilderness for 1260 days. So this wilderness journey, all right, foreshadows and depicts the 42 places Yasharal encamped in the wilderness journey to the promised land, that is the plains of Moab near Jericho, when they came out of Mizraim. So when you read Numbers chapter 33, verses 1 to 49, you will be amazed to see that there were 42 places in the wilderness that Yasharal encamped. All right, they set up the tabernacle, removed it, journeyed again. They rested at a place, set up the tabernacle. There were 42 places in the wilderness. So see how all this ties up. I won't take you through all these names, but I will leave it in a note form so that when you read Numbers chapter 33, verses 1 to 49, you count those places literally, you will get 42 places. Okay. And outer court is given to the Gentiles. So the corporate body, the assembly, all right, is given to the Gentiles to trample underfoot, and that is the same time when the elect are away from that outer court or that outer shell called assembly, and they are nourished for time 1260 days, all right, or time times dividing of time, which I will touch base a bit later. Okay, so 1260, the number of days, or 42 months, the word Kadashim, made new, are all figurative of the wilderness journey Yasharal is in when the abomination of desolation is taking place. So these 1260 days or 42 months can also be seen in Revelation chapter 13 verses 5. And there was given to him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and authority to make war 42 months was given to him. So the living creature, all right, made war with Yasharal for 42 months, same period, 1260 days. All right, so amazing. Second thing I would like to touch base upon is the 42 lads, all right, were torn up by two bears when they were mocking Elisha, and he cursed them in the name of Yahuwah. This shows a picture of the two beastly kingdom, two bears, one physical and one spiritual, all right, which is tearing up the lads or the little children, all right, who are cursing the true prophecy or the full testimony. So that is the picture again we see in these 42 lads being torn up by the two bears, right? Bear was a symbol of Medes Persia. That also I will touch base upon a little bit later. You can read this account in 2 Kings chapter 2 verses 23 and 24. Alright, the third thing we see is 42 cities were given to the Levites. Numbers chapter 35 verses 6 and 7, and plus 6 cities as cities of refuge to them. So if you read this, it says the cities which, Numbers 35 verses 6, the cities which you shall give to the Levim shall be 6 cities of refuge, which you shall give for the manslayer to flee there, and besides them you shall give 42 cities. Verse 7, all the cities which you shall give to the Levim shall be 48 cities, them and their pasture land. So the 42 cities would be their habitation where they will dwell, and the 6 cities, all right, where they could flee if they mistakenly killed anybody. All right, so every tribe had that inheritance of cities of refuge. Okay, so we see the number 42 as the habitation of Levites, and understand that the Levitical priesthood today, through carnal people or fleshly people, is claiming to be part of Yasharal, trying to overpower the Melchizedek priesthood by the man slaying Torah of sin and death with nowhere to flee. Okay, now when we read Daniel chapter 12 verses 7, this is very interesting. It says, I heard the man dressed in linen who was above the waters of the river, and he raised his right hand and his left towards the heavens, and swore by him who lives forever that it would be for times and dividing of time. And when they have made an end of scattering the power of the set apart people, all these events shall be finished. So this can also be seen in the lunar calendar that which is followed by the Jews, where Yahuwah is showing us from these verses, all right, what he actually means by times and dividing of time. So a lunar calendar is of 360 days. Okay, so time would be 360, times would be 360 into 2, making it to 720. And dividing of time, 360 divided by 2 is 180. So if you add all these numbers, it comes to 1260 days. It's so amazing, right? In the parallel account related to the latter time summing up to the end, Adon said, all right, Luke chapter 21 verses 24, which is a parallel account to Matthew 24, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword and shall be led captive into all the nations, and Jerusalem shall be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. So are you supposing that the Adon was speaking of literal Jerusalem, or the one occupied by the adversary and his people, which includes the New Testament corporate assembly? Remember, all fleeing from Yehuda, the tribe they identify with, from where the master sprang from, because right now we don't have a ethnic inheritance to identify which tribe we are from. There are 12 tribes, right? So, but by believing in Mashiach, all right, we are currently incorporated and portrayed as the tribe of Yehuda from where a master sprang forth with the Melchizedek priesthood, which Moses never spoke about. That's what scripture says, right? So that is the picture that we are seeing over here, beloved. We need to understand this in the right perspective. So all fleeing from Yehuda are fleeing to the mountains surrounding Jerusalem is figurative of the wilderness, where we are seeing the covenant Yasharel woman is nourished for 1260 days, equivalent to 42 months, which is the same time the Gentiles are trampling the corporate assembly, the outer court, remember, which claim they are the New Testament temple. They have no part in the internal temple, and we are not talking about the building, all right, the temple which was 2000 years ago. We are talking about the New Testament assembly, all right, the temple, all right. So Daniel chapter 11 verses 31 to 33, forces from him shall stand, shall profane the sanctuary, the fortress, and shall remove the set sacrifice, and they shall set up the abomination of desolation. Verse 32, by flatteries he shall ruin evildoers against the covenant, but the people who know his shall be strong and shall work. Verse 33, and those who have insight among people shall teach to the many, yet they shall fall by sword and by flame, by captivity and by plunder for days. So the word flatteries is the Hebrew word khalak, right, which is H2514, and is from khalaka, which is H2513, which means the part received from what was divided. In short, it means portion. Okay, so the king has forces, as we saw in Revelation chapter 9. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon and in Greek is Apollyon, who shall stand and profane the sanctuary, grooming the set sacrifice, which is a synonym for the true sacrifice of our Adon, by misrepresenting him. So he will replace it with the abomination of desolation. Remember, the Adon says, let the reader understand, Matthew 24:15, by the portion allotted to Hashatan, or translated as flatteries, he shall ruin evildoers against the covenant. Okay, so Daniel is told, which he notes in chapter 12 verses 7, that the power of the set apart people will be scattered for times and dividing of time, and the Hebrew words is moed, moedim, 𝒮𝒃. Now moed is the very same word used for Yahusha's Sabbath and feast days, as mentioned in Leviticus chapter 23, which is translated also as appointed times or feasts. So we saw that the 1260 days or 3.5 years or 42 months, all right, time period where covenant Yasharel is nourished away from the face of the dragon, and the very same period where the corporate assemblies are overrun by the abomination of desolation. The truthful testimony, Torah and the prophets, is killed after these symbolic 1260 days by Hashatan, denoted by the king over the abyss, all right, or bottomless pit, as translated elsewhere, who is loosed for the little season. So the moed, moedim, and 𝒮𝒃, that is time, times, and dividing of time, brings us to the end, right? So when we read Revelation chapter 11 verses 3, it says, and I will give power unto my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1260 days. 3 score days is 60 days. clothed in sackcloth. It's the same period, 1260, which we are seeing. Verse 7, and when they have finished their testimony, the living creature, the Hebrew word is chaya, Greek word is therion, which I showed you also that the beast is a sacrificial animal, right? That he comes as that sacrificial animal or as the lamb, right? I am he, that is Mashiach. He comes out of the tahum, the deep well, or the abyss, abysso, the Greek word is abysso, all right, shall make war with them and shall overcome them and kill them. So the war is with the set apart ones, that is with us. Okay, and the same thing we see in Revelation chapter 12, verses 5 and 6. And she bore a male child who was to shepherd all nations with a rod of iron, and the child was caught away to Elohim and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by Elohim to be nourished there 1260 days. Now, when you read verse 13 to 16, all right, I'll read these verses and then I'll expound on them. It says, verse 13, and it came to pass when the dragon saw that he was thrown down to the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the male child. Verse 14, but the two wings of the great eagle were given to the woman to fly into the wilderness to a place that she was nourished there for a time and times and half a time from the presence of the serpent. See, it's all tying up to Daniel's prophecy, all tying up to abomination of desolation. Verse 15, and the serpent spewed a river of water from his mouth after the woman to be carried away with the river. But the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and drank up that river which the dragon spewed out of his mouth. So if you notice in Revelation chapter 12, verses 6, all right, it's mentioned that covenant Yasharal, after delivering the man-child, fled into the wilderness where she is nourished for 1260 days. We read this in the first part of the verses, right? She is nourished for 1260 days. Okay. This confinement shows that she is nourished when Ha-Shatan was tied to the 1000 years. All right, where we read in Revelation chapter 20. And the other times and dividing of time, which again sums up to 1260, which we saw in Revelation chapter 12, verses 14, is actually the same period, because the man-child who is Yahusha is the center point for the Old Testament believers and the New Testament believers, because all of us transition into him. That's how we understand the language. All right, everyone in the Old Covenant, be it Abraham, name anyone of the true elect, all right, and the true elect in the New Testament, all transition into Yahusha Mashiach, to the center point. All right, he's also known as the Shamash, which is the center point of the candlestick. All right, so it's the same time period, because the man-child who is Yahusha is the center point for Old Testament believers and New Testament believers, because all transition to him. So the war in heavens with Michael, as stated in Revelation chapter 12, verses 7, we already saw who Michael is. All right, the name Michael means who is as Elohim, and is figurative of Mashiach himself, because Shaul the emissary talks for the Adon himself will descend from heaven, and with the voice of the archangel. So why would he portray Mashiach as the voice of the archangel, who is Michael? All right, so it shows that the war is spiritual, and Shaitan is cast out of the heavenly pattern, that is the new creation order, because that's where he wanted his final place to be. All right, and he finds no place in his desire to get into the new creation order, and he again tries to persecute the woman in the wilderness, but she is given wings of a great eagle. The water he spews out of his mouth is figurative of the false bashara. So the false prophets come with false bashara out of their mouth, right? So that is figurative of the false basharas, to bring her back into his confined place from where she is fleeing. All right, but the earth, that is the carnal people, earthy, fleshly people, help her, because they drink in that spewed waters of the dragon, all right, the false basharas. See what a wonderful imagery if you understand these things. So when we see Revelation chapter 11, verses 3, the two witnesses prophesying for 1260 days, they are the Torah and the prophets, and during the testimony, Ha-Shatan was restrained from overrunning the assembly, even though his plantations were within the kingdom, which we saw in the parables of wheat and tares, wise and foolish virgins, birds in the branches, leaven in 3 measures of meal, etc. All right. So when we read Revelation chapter 11 verses 8 and 9, and their dead bodies, now this is talking about the 2 witnesses, right? And the dead bodies lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is Egypt, where also a master was impaled. But was a master impaled in Egypt? No, but these cities are likened to Sodom. All right. What happened in Sodom and Gomorrah? Lot was told to flee. All right. So he fled from that corporate body, all right, which was fitted for destruction. And doesn't it say in the New Testament, I think Jude says about, like, the vengeance of eternal fire. So he's talking about the destruction that is coming as it happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. So these are the things where we need to discern. And Mitzrayim, what happened in Mitzrayim? Again, the elect, that is Yasharal, fleeing Mitzrayim, all right, into the wilderness. So that's where we need to understand where also a master was impaled. So it's talking about Jerusalem, not the carnal Jerusalem which was 2000 years ago, or the one which is formed now in 1948. It's talking about the Jerusalem that is occupied by Hagar. Galatians chapter 4. All right, we saw the 2 covenants, right? One is from above, Sarah, the heavenly Jerusalem, who's mother of us all, and the current present Jerusalem is likened to Hagar and her children in bondage, it says. Shaul says. Okay, so verse 9, and some of the peoples and tribes and tongues and nation shall see their dead bodies for 3.5 days, and not allow their dead bodies to be placed in tombs. Now the word 3.5 days, the word days there is the Greek word hemera, which is 𝒮𝒃, and hemera is from the root, has a root word hora, which is 𝒮5610. So hemera means time, space between dawn and dark, figurative of a period, age, years, or days. All right, hora, 𝒮5610 means hour. It's literally or figuratively day, hour, instant, season, short, tide, or high time. So hence, to translate it as days, 3.5 days does not make sense when we compare it to 1260 days or 42 months. We see it as 3.5 years, or that little season that we are talking about, where Hashatan, right, has taken over the entire corporate body. Right? That was his desire, that he wants to rule among the stars of the heavens. Right? We saw that in our previous study in Revelation chapter 20, right? The 1,000-year study. So hence it makes sense when we take it as years, as it tied up to the other texts, because if you divide 42 months by 12 months, it comes to 3.5 years. Right? So it's so beautiful if you understand this spiritual language. And remember, this is figurative language to let us know that the end of a Shemitah was bound by time, times, and dividing of time, which we saw as Moed, Moedim, Ǩadseh, which is the same word for feasts or appointed times. All right, as stated in Leviticus chapter 23. So the Shemitah includes the feast days, Shabbat days, and the law of Shabbat for the land. Okay, so Leviticus 25 talks about the laws of the Shabbat of the land. In Leviticus 23, it begins by tying up the Shabbat day as the Moed. All right, if you go back there, you can read there. If you want, I can quickly show it to you as well. Just a moment. Leviticus 23. Okay, it says, "Speak unto the children of Yasharel and say unto them concerning the feast of Yahuwah, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations. Even these are my feasts." See the word here, Moed, H4150. The same word, Moed, time. Okay. 6 days shall work be done, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of rest. So you see here, it's tying up the day of rest, Shabbat, to the Moed, or the appointed time. All right. And it says that it is the day is Shabbat of rest, and holy convocation ye shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of Yahuwah in all your dwellings. So it is tying the Shabbat day also to this appointed time. So it's talking about the entire Shemitah. So indicating the carnal Jerusalem when the full testimony is killed, the dead bodies indicating the elect still being in the corporate assembly, being silenced until they hear the voice come up here. When you read Revelation 11 verses 11 and 12, it says, and after the 3.5, again the days, same, right? We saw the word Hemera, all right? After the 3.5 years, you can say, or that little season, the Ruach of life from Elohim entered into them, and they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell on those who saw them. Verse 12, and they heard a loud voice from the heaven saying to them, come up here. And they went up into the heaven in a cloud, and the enemies saw them. So come up here is to be understood that we run to the heavenly pattern, to be under the shadow of the wings of Yahusha HaMashiach, our Elohim. So the language is parabolic and in signification, and it would be a grave error to take it literally being taken to heaven, because the third woe is yet to come. It says that we are right here on earth until the consummation. There is no pre-trib rapture, there is no mid-trib rapture, right, as the Christianity and some Hebrew movements teach. Revelation chapter 11 verses 14, the second woe is past, see the third woe is coming speedily. So we are still here, right? The third woe is not yet finished. Hence all this is tying up and woven to be understood. Ha-Shatan's loosening is his attempt to gain ground within the new creation order, while he is given ground in the corporate assembly in this world. He has no ground in those who are in the new creation order. All the elect in the corporate assembly flee as they see mystery Babylon sitting within. Remember Zechariah chapter 5, all right, the woman termed as wickedness was sitting inside the ephah. Ephah was a just measure used in all Old Testament sacrifices. Okay, so those outside in the field or on housetop, now which we will read the next set of verses, do not enter the house to create a new assembly. The house is the carcass or dead body, and the signs of times tells us it is delivered to Ha-Shatan for this little season. Now read these verses very carefully. Matthew chapter 24 verses 17 and 18. And whoever is on the housetop must not return to get anything from his house. Verse 18, and let him who is in the field not turn back to carry away his garment. Housetop and field is a place of being in the world preaching the Bashara. Housetop is a place of announcement, not being afraid of being killed. Remember, 𝒮𝒽 was the valley where the carcasses of the beasts sacrificed were burnt, where the worm doesn't die out and neither the fire. And see what Adon himself says. Matthew chapter 10 verses 27 and 28. What I say to you in darkness, speak it out in the light. What is whispered in your ears, proclaim it from the housetops. Do not fear of those who kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul. Rather fear the one who is able to destroy both the soul and the body in 𝒮𝒽. All right. So the house, which is the Hebrew word Beth, is the assembly where the one on the housetop in the field are commanded not to enter in. And it's because the house is referring to an assembly is given over to Ha-Shatan as his portion. So the word Beth is also the body. All right, we transition from a dead carcass to the living Elohim in his body which rose from the dead, and he is alive forevermore. Hallelujah. We who have fled to Yahusha for refuge under his wings are nourished away from the face of the dragon or the serpent for times and dividing of time of 1260 days, 42 months or 3.5 years, where the entire Shemitah is denoted by the word Moed for appointed times, are handed over to Ha-Shatan to scatter the power of the set apart people. We need to be discerning of the signs of times, and this is the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. Let him who has ears, let him hear, let him understand. Let the reader understand, our master said. He who has ears, let him hear what the Ruach says. Now, to define certain parables. So the parables of the wise and foolish virgins is uniquely placed among other parables in Matthew chapter 25 in the Olivet Discourse, which is a continuation of the events Yahusha spoke of in Matthew chapter 24 to show the kingdom of the 𝒮𝒴𝒹𝒶𝓃, all right, has a mixed multitude of spiritual as well as fleshly, and only towards the end the separation happens. Following this parable is the parable of the talents, which is the parable of Kikar, and the separation of sheep and goats, which show that the end is near, and the separation of what was mixed, as stated in parables in Matthew chapter 13, are being separated. So when you turn to Matthew chapter 13, we see a series of parables where the enemy came and mixed his people in the reign of the 𝒮𝒴𝒹𝒶𝓃. So examples, parable of the seed sown. All right, some fell by the wayside, some fell on the rocky ground among the thorns, and some fell in the right path. Right, that parable of wheat and tares. What does it show? At night the enemy came and sowed the tares. Let all grow together until the harvest time when both are separated. All right, parable of the mustard seed, where it says the smallest of all seeds, when it is sown, grows to a huge tree, and the fowls, which are the unclean creatures, coming and making nests in its branches. All right, again showing 𝒮𝒴𝒃's people within the corporate assembly. All right, then it talks about a woman mixing leaven in 3 measures of flour until the whole dough is leavened. Again, picture of Jezebel coming and putting leaven inside the assembly until everything is overrun by 𝒮𝒴𝒃, right? Her doctrine. Okay. Then parable of the net, where the good and bad fish are pulled together. The good being the kosher and the bad being the non-kosher are thrown away. So hence Matthew chapter 25 is in the Olivet discourse, showing the separation of what the enemy has sown in the reign of the 𝒮𝒴𝒃. All right, and it says in Matthew chapter 13, verses 34 and 35, Yahusha spoke all these things in parables to the crowds of people, and he did not speak to them a word without a parable. Verse 35, to fulfill what the prophet spoke, saying, I shall open my mouth with a parable, I utter riddles from ancient times. So everything was spoken in parables, and we need to understand the parabolic language. Let him who has ears hear. All right. Matthew chapter 24, verses 19. Woe to those who are pregnant and those who are nursing children in those days. All right. When you read Lamentations chapter 4, verses 4, the tongue of the infant cleaves to the roof of its mouth because of thirst. The little ones ask for bread, but no one breaks it for them. So the conditions of the babies held in the womb, where they get the nourishment from, and nursing infants feeding on milk, and growing children asking for bread, is a picture of being overrun with the famine of the word of Yahuwah, which we read in Amos chapter 8, verses 10 to 12. Then I shall turn your festivals into mourning and all your songs into lamentation, and I shall bring sackcloth on all loins and baldness on every head, and I shall make it like the mourning for a only one, and the end of it like a bitter day. Verse 11, behold, the days are coming, declares Adonai Yahuwah, that I shall send a famine on the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but rather for hearing the words of Yahuwah. Verse 12, and they shall wander from sea to sea, and from the north even to the east. They shall roam about to seek the word of Yahuwah, but they shall not find it. So the womb holds the baby, where the baby receives the nourishment, being in the blood and water of the womb. But woe to those having a baby in the womb and those who are nursing babies in those days. Babies have no knowledge of good and evil, and they do not discern between right and wrong. And those instructing them have to teach them the basic elementary and foundational principles of morality, and bring up the children in the nourishment and admonishment of who Yahusha is. So there would be woe to those who are saying they are part of Mother Jerusalem, an assembly or a corporate body, if she holds these nursing babies in her, because her salvation would be in childbearing, and this childbearing is of Mashiach likeness, which she is not able to attain. Remember that yearning, all right, that to become like Mashiach until Mashiach is formed in us. All right, she is never able to attain to the Mashiach likeness. That's a picture over here that the woe is given to the woman. All right, and we have already seen this. That how the woman is saved in childbearing, bringing forth Mashiach likeness. All right, that's how we are identified. All right, with the heavenly Jerusalem. if we have that Mashiach likeness in us, and that yearning to bear that Mashiach likeness. So if the woman herself would be in deception, how would she admonish her babies in the way of Yahusha? She can't. All right. And doesn't Shaul say this in Hebrews chapter 5, verses 11 to 14, concerning whom we have much to say and hard to explain, since you have become dull of hearing. Verse 12 of Hebrews 5, for indeed, although by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the first elements of the words of Elohim, and you have become such as need milk and not solid food. For everyone partaking of milk is inexperienced in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. Verse 14, but solid food is for the mature, whose senses have been trained by practice to discern both good and evil. So if you are looking for a supernatural experience in an assembly here on earth, you are mistaken, as there will be no revival but a falling away that has taken place, of which Shaul says in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verses 3, where we read, for it shall not come unless the falling away is to come first, and the man of lawlessness is to be revealed, the son of destruction. Matthew chapter 24 verses 20 to 21. But pray that your flight shall not be in the harvest or in the Shabbat, for then there shall be a great tribulation, such as not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever shall. So Yahusha want to pray that his people's flight, all right, or fleeing, should not be in harvest or in the Shabbat, or else there would be a great tribulation, such has not been occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever shall be. So the word, some translations say, your flight shall not be in the winter, all right, because winter, harvest, all this means koreb. The Hebrew word koreb means winter, autumn, or harvest. And 𝒮𝒃𝒃 properly the crop gathered, all right, the autumn and the winter season, figurative of ripeness of age, all right. The same word is kharaf, 𝒮𝒃𝒃, which means to pull off, that is to expose, as by stripping, to betroth, as if to surrender, figuratively, to karpat, that is defame, all right, or blaspheme, or you can say reproach. Okay, so all this is the word kharaf. So Yahusha says to pray that this flight from the abomination of desolation be not in the time when Yehuda is in the season of transitioning during the harvest time, a time for the little season where there is blasphemy and reproach happening. Because turning to Mashiach, we are in a journey of transition from the fleshly ordinances to a realization of spiritual fulfillment in Mashiach. And Yahusha says to pray that this does not happen during the winter or harvest time, all right, that little season, or else there will be great affliction as never been before. So unless these days would have been shortened, there would be no flesh who would have been saved, but for the elect's sake, Yahuwah shortened those days. Matthew 24 verses 20, all right, says Ba Shabbat. All right, if you read over here, 24 verses 20, Ba Shabbat, all right, the Hebrew word is Ba Shabbat, which means in the Shabbat, all right, where they have translated as on the Shabbat, all right, in the Hebrew translations. So, turning to Mashiach, we are in a journey, all right, and in the Shabbat, we are in the journey in the Shabbat, because this shows the Shabbat to be a transition completed, as there will be no more timekeepers, as the physical day fully transitions to in Mashiach, who is the day star, star of Yaakov, bright and morning star. So Yasharel, after winter, enters spring, all right, when Passover comes. So those in transition would find Mashiach as the Passover lamb, as Shaul states in 1 Corinthians chapter 5 verses 7 and 8. Therefore cleanse out the old leaven, so that you are a new lump, as you are unleavened. For also Mashiach Passover was slaughtered for us. So then let us celebrate the festival, not with old leaven, nor with the leaven of evil and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. And Mashiach at Passover said, he will not eat bread or drink the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of Hashemayim comes. So he was pointing us to the marriage supper of the Lamb when he was talking about, you know, pray that a flight is not in the harvest time or in Shabbat, all right? Because it will be a great time of tribulation for the believers or the elect, because they are just transitioning from milk to solid meat, and who's there to give them solid meat once they come to a certain realization, all right, that what am I doing, where am I, but for their sake, all right, Yahusha has raised up, his meat, the solid meat, which is given outside. We need to go outside the camp to bear his reproach. Romans 8:19, for the intense longing of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing of the sons of Elohim. All right, the two sons of Elohim will be revealed in the separation only. All right, when the wheat and the tares, wise and foolish virgins, all right, etc., are separated, sheep and goats. So only the signs of times, are discerned from Torah, will tell us when the separation takes place. So if you notice the parable of the 10 virgins, the 10 maidens took their lamps. Now the Hebrew word for lamps is nar, all right, and they went to meet the bridegroom. So the Hebrew word for maiden is alma, which is 𝒮𝒃959. So this is the word alma. Hebrew reads from the right to the left, okay, which has the root word alam, which means hidden, concealed, or something secret, a secret thing, 𝒮𝒃956. And it's like a veil from the sight, that is to conceal. And the same word alam, 𝒮𝒃957, means ancient, of old and everlasting, something which is remote, all right, corresponding to a remote time. Okay, so the number 10 is a complete number of 10 virgins, where 5 is the number of Torah. Remember, 5 books of Torah, which has both the blessings and the cursings. Blessings to who discern the Torah of life, and the 5 senses renewed or made new to discern spiritual things, while the fleshly don't have the ability to discern their 5 senses and are occupied in the fleshly appeasements, in the carnal letter. The 5 senses are seeing, hearing, smelling, all right, taste and touch. So hence Torah is also the number for grace or khan. The Hebrew word for grace is khan. So the 10 virgins, alma, of old, alam, hidden, alam, takes us back to the past time where the night was watched with the lamb. All right. So when we read Numbers chapter 8 verses 1 to 3, which I will read. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to Aaron and say to him, when you set up the alephthau lamps, the word is nar, H5216, let the 7 lamps give light in front of the lampstand. And Aaron did so. He set up the lamps to face towards the front of the lampstand as Yahuwah commanded Moshe. Remember the 7 lamps before the throne, where the lamb is in the midst, are the 7 spirits of Elohim, which he possesses. He was seen by Yahukanan among the 7 golden lampstands. So all points out to the spiritual Shemitah being transitioned in Yahusha Mashiach in the new creation order. All right. I've read out these scriptures. You may read it again, Revelation chapter 4 verses 5. And there are 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne, and they are the 7 spirits of Elohim. All right. Then Yahusha says in Revelation 3 verses 1, these things say he who has the 7 spirits of Elohim and the 7 stars. All right. And Revelation 5 verses 6, and I saw, behold, in the midst of the throne and of the 4 living creatures, and in the midst of the elders stood a lamb as if it had been slain. So the lamb is in the midst of the throne. Remember, I told you the imagery, of the extension of the one sitting on the throne is he himself. All right, here we are seeing him in an imagery as the lamb. All right, there jasper and ruby, and here as the lamb who has the 7 ruachot of Elohim. Revelation 7:17, for the lamb who is in the midst of the throne. Okay. Now let's turn to Matthew 24:28. For where there is a corpse, there the vultures shall gather. So the dead corpse is the assembly run over by the false basharas of Hashatan, as he is given this over for the little season. This won't make sense unless you understand why Hashatan disputed the body of Moses with Michael, the archangel. I've touched base this on my video and note form. The body of Moses, you may refer in detail. I've explained what it means. So those departed from Christianity form an assembly to have in them wheat and tares, wise and foolish virgins, fowls nesting in the branches, leaven in the 3 measures of meal, bad fish among the good ones, and it is a harvest time where we are seeing the separation. So while we agree that there was a New Testament assembly formed, all right, remember we are talking about the latter time summing up to the end, all right, where there is a new instruction, all right, for the body of Mashiach to flee from the carcass, right, the house, which is given over to Hashatan. So what is left behind is in a portion is a dead body or corpse, and you cannot be in a dead corpse wanting to experience supernatural experience. You cannot be in a dead corpse. You cannot form another assembly, because again you are inviting people where Shaitan will come and put in tares. Right? So think about these things, discerning the signs of the times. I won't read the scriptures where it talks about the messenger standing in the sun, asking the winged birds to come and eat the flesh of the kings and captains. It's all there in scripture. What I want to touch base upon, the next verse, Matthew 24:29. But immediately after the distress of those days, the sun shall turn dark, and the moon shall not shine in its light, and the stars shall fall from the heavens, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. So there is the sign of the sun, moon, and stars that has been given to us. Psalms chapter 19, verses 4 to 6. The lion has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he has set up a tent for the sun, and in it the sun is like a bridegroom coming out of his room. It rejoices like a strong man to run the path. Its rising is from one end of the heavens, and its circuit to the other end, and nothing is hidden from its heat. So the sun here is likened to a bridegroom coming out of kind. The Hebrew word there is kind of man, 𝒮𝒹𝒶𝓃, to run its course. So when you read Malachi chapter 4, verses 2, it talks about Yahusha HaMashiach, all right, who's compared, who's said of as the son of righteousness, Shamash of righteousness, arising with healing in his wings. Okay, so the signs were related to the firmament and show us while the physical sun is darkened and strikes those occupied in carnal observance in opposition, as Torah states, a bridegroom who is like the sun will rise with healing in his wings on us. Revelation chapter 6 verses 12. And I looked when he opened the 6th seal and saw a great earthquake came to be, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. The sun or Shamash is likened to Yahusha the bridegroom coming out of his chamber as a strong man rejoicing to run the path of a circle with nothing hidden from its path, scorching all those outside the covenant with burning like a furnace, burning all the proud and the wrongdoer as a stubble. Malachi chapter 4 verses 2 says, and you shall go out and be scattered like calves. And the same word used for calves, which is agal, 𝒮𝒽𝒶𝒃96, means circular or round, shows the elect of Yahusha are being scattered on the circle of the earth, whom he gathers under his wings, right, by healing them. Revelation chapter 16 verses 8 to 9. And the fourth messenger poured out his bowl on the sun, and it was given to him to burn men with fire. Verse 9. And men were burnt with great heat, and they blasphemed the name of Elohim, who possesses authority over these plagues, and they did not repent to give him esteem. So those outside the covenant will be scorched with severe heat, turning them to stubble, as Malachi chapter 4 verses 1 says, while the elect will be covered by the Son of Righteousness with healing in his wings, even though they are scattered. So when measuring time, the moon was designated to rule only with the stars by night, meaning that when the moon begins to rule, rising when the sun has just set, marking the commencement of the night. All right, the moon is the lesser light spoken of in Genesis chapter 1 verses 14 to 18. We find it was created and ordained for the purpose of projecting its full light on the night it ruled, which can only be realized in a full moon, and is designated spiritually to prophecy, which shines in a dark place until the day dawns and morning star rises in our hearts. So the bright and morning star is Yahusha HaMashiach, who ends the night. All right. Second Peter chapter 1 verses 19. And we have the prophetic word more certain, which you do well to heed as a light that shines in a dark place until the day dawns and the morning star rises in your hearts. Right now the morning star has risen in our hearts, but we have not yet entered into New Jerusalem when there are no timekeepers. Remember, there's no sun, moon, and stars. The Lamb is the light thereof, of the great city. All right. So that is how we find our fulfillment, and this little season is a waiting period for that to happen. Now it's interesting to see that the whore, all right, she tells us when the good man of the house is coming. When you read Proverbs chapter 7 verses 19, it says, "For my husband is not at home, he has gone on a long journey." So she's seducing the man to come, saying that my man has gone on a long journey. Come, let us fill the night with love. Right? So this is how she's seducing. And in verse 20, she says, "He took a bag of silver with him. He comes home on the day of the full moon." Now the word kasa, which is translated as full moon over here, H3677, also means covering. All right, which is Strong's H3680. The same word, if you see over here, same word, kasa, a primitive root to grow fat, that is to be covered with flesh. All right. The same word H3678, all right, properly covered, that is a throne, seat, stool, or throne. All right. So this woman, the whore, as we can see, all right, from H3680, she's full of fat flesh. All right. She's saying that, I'm covered, all right, with the bashara. I have the true bashara. The same word flesh, all right, basar comes from the root word bashara, all right, which is they have translated as gospel. So she is saying that I have the true bashara. All right, come to me. All right, be within me to experience the true love of Mashiach. All right, but he's gone on a long journey. He's coming back. All right, she's acknowledging and she's telling the time when he's coming back. He's coming back when she is ruling. Remember, Revelation in chapter 17 or 18, I think it says that the mystery Babylon says, "I sit as a queen. I am no widow." I mean, she's ruling. She's sitting on a throne. So see all this, how it ties to that beautiful picture. These are the signs of times that we need to discern, beloved. Okay. So once these facts are realized, it can be understood why the urgent call goes forth in Revelation for Yahusha's obedient followers to come out of Babylon. The call is not to come out to form another assembly, but there is a waiting period. So in the imagery of the transference of altars, we see the souls who were killed, not literally, but testimony killed because of the word of Elohim, and because of their testimony, who were asking for vengeance, and to them were given white robes, and they were asked to rest for a little season. So when you read Revelation chapter 6 verses 9 to 14, okay, it says, "And when he opened the fifth seal, I saw underneath the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of Elohim, and because of the testimony which was in their mouths. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O my Adon, holy and true, shall you not judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth?" Verse 11, "And there was given to every one of them white robe, and it was said to them that they should rest yet for a little season." So the Greek word for little season is chronos. Okay, so I'll skip all these verses because of lack of time. And that same word we see over here. If you read in Revelation chapter 20, again I'll skip all these verses, I'll only read verse 3. And he threw him into the abyss and shut him up and sealed it over him, so that he would not deceive the nations any longer, all right, while the 1,000 years should be finished. After that, he is loosened for a little season. That same word chronos is used over here. All right. Okay, and we see that Ha-Shatan, in my previous study, I've touched base upon this, was tied to 1,000-year confinement, which is a shortfall of the life entering eternity, a place allowed for him in the corporate assembly. All right. Ha-Shatan is tied to keep people in the carnal letter so that they do not cross over to the ruach of life. So the little season is synonymous with the souls under the altar, the elect figurative or switching of altar to the spiritual. Now they are under the altar of Mashiach. Right, that's the picture over there. Who are told to rest for that little season of chronos. Right, so the Greek word for the little season, chronos, is the same word used when the elect are comforted to rest for this little season, while Ha-Shatan is, we already saw, the rest in the wilderness for times, and the dividing of time of 1260 days, 42 months, or 3.5 years away from the face of the dragon. When the dragon was cast out of the new creation order, as he has no place in it, he persecutes the covenant Yasharal. All right, and covenant Yasharal is crying out to Mashiach, when will that day of vengeance come? When will the day of Yahuwah be completed? They are told to rest for the little seasons, synonymous with times and dividing of time, or this 1260 days, 42 months, or 3.5 years, which is a figurative language. Day of Yahuwah. Remember Yahukanan, when he was caught up in the Ruach in the day of Yahuwah, which he says in Revelation 1 verses 10, I was in the Ruach on the Adon's day, and I heard behind me a great voice as the sound of the trumpet. So the day of Yahuwah is a synonym used for a latter time summing up to the end. All right, and that's where the elect are asking, when, Master, when are you coming? All right, come quickly, deliver us, take us away from this world to be with you, right, in New Jerusalem. So that is the picture over here. Okay, now what is very interesting is when you read Amos chapter 5 verses 18 and 19, it says, woe to those desiring the day of Yahuwah. To what end is it to you? The day of Yahuwah shall be darkness and not light. Verse 19, as if a man flees from before a lion, and a bear meets him, or went into the house and leans his hand against the wall, and a snake bites him. All right, so it's like a man who was careful, who was vigilant. He fled from the lion. The lion was a symbol of Babylon, and he fled from the bear as well. Bear was the symbol of Medes Persia. Remember the captivity first under Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar and his kingdom was destroyed by Medes Persia, portrayed by the bear. All right, and where did he land up? He was careful and vigilant. He's landed up into the house. He leaned his hand on the wall. Wall is like seeking support of that house, and the serpent bit him. That is like, that is going to be the day of Yahuwah. That is the sign of the time for us. Come out of the house. Do not enter into the house. All right, to take your clothes. Those who are in the field or those who are on the housetop, it says. Okay, so it's a picture of one able to flee the Babylonian captivity and Medes Persia captivity, but he won't be able to flee the dead carcass as he will be killed by the poison in it. Now let's see the fig tree in leaf. So many people interpret the fig tree in leaf to mean Israel was formed as a nation again in 1948. So this is the carnal stance, because the fig tree has to do with the tree of good, knowledge of good and evil. We see Adam and Eve clothing their nakedness with fig leaves. So when you read Matthew chapter 24 verses 32 and 33, it says, and from the fig tree learn this parable, when its branch is lush and its leaves sprout, you know that summer is near. Verse 33, so you too, when you see all these things, know that he is close at the entrance. So when you read Genesis chapter 3 verses 7, it says the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed leaves of fig tree together, all right, and made for themselves loin coverings. Revelation chapter 6 verses 13, and the stars of the heaven fell to the earth as a fig tree casts its unripe figs when it is shaken by a great wind. So the stars of the heaven falling to earth as unripe figs falling is symbolic of sons associated with the kingdom of heaven. They have fallen to the earth, that is carnality or fleshliness. Covenant Yasharal is denoted by the olive tree, as Shaul says in Romans chapter 11, Remember, I also spoke about the when Noah sends out the dove, she comes back with a freshly plucked in olive leaf, which is a picture of hope. All right, that there is Yasharal, all right, existing. Okay, even among all these abomination of desolation. Then Zechariah's vision, where he sees the two olive branches which are beside the two golden pipes in Zechariah chapter 4. You can read that. And he says, these, verse 14, these are the two anointed sons who are standing by the Adon of the whole earth. So the two olive branches are the two houses of Yasharal, Ephraim representing the 10 tribes as Yasharal, who are scattered, and Yehuda representing the two tribes themselves, and Binyamin. Alright, so hence the fig tree in leaf is a sign of second death, as Yahuwah told Adam and Eve that if they eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, dying you shall die. Alright, so if you read the verse very carefully, looking up the Hebrew words, it says mut, alright, which means dying you shall die. Tamut, mut, tamut means dying you shall die. It talks about the second death. Alright, so that's what the sign is over here, the fig tree in leaf. Remember the fig tree which Yahusha cursed when he went to find fruit? That's the picture. Okay. So Yahusha likens the days to the days of Noah, when only 8 souls were saved from the entire world. Only 8 souls saved in the entire world. That you can read in Matthew 24:37 and verse 38. Verse 37 to 39. I will skip those verses. I will now talk about Matthew 24 verses 40 to 41. Then there shall be 2 men in the field, one shall be gathered and one shall be left. Verse 41, 2 women shall be grinding at the mills, one shall be gathered and one shall be left. So in the parallel passage in Luke, the disciples, they ask Yahusha, where shall this be? Yahusha says, where the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered. So you can read the parallel verses over here. Luke chapter 17 verses 35 to 37, the same thing about 2 men in the field, one shall be gathered, one will be left. 2 women grinding at the mills, one shall be gathered and one shall be left. And they answered and said to him, Luke 17 verses 37, Adon, and he said to them, they answered and said to him, where shall this be our Adon? So where shall this be our Adon? And he said to them, where the carcass is, there the eagle shall be gathered. All right, so it's all about the carcass of the dead body, where the eagles who are birds of prey gather. It's the same eagle's wings, all right, which saves the covenant Yasharal, because she is able to discern to flee from the carcass. You see that picture? It doesn't mean that a woman is given wings and is flying to a glory. No, she's fleeing. All right, she's looking at that carcass and she's fleeing. So that's a picture over there. So of the woman given wings of the great eagle to flee into the wilderness is a picture. All right, she able to discern and flees over there. So eagles are picture of false prophets. Revelation 18 verses 21 to 22. I will touch base upon this part of the verse. 2 women shall be grinding at the mill, one shall be gathered and one shall be left. Okay. Revelation 18, 21 to 22. And one mighty messenger picked up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, with such a rush the great city, Babel, shall be thrown down and shall not be found any more at all. Verse 22, and the sound of harpists and musicians and flautists and trumpeters shall not be heard in you any more at all, and no craftsman of any trade shall be found in you any more at all, and the sound of a millstone shall not be heard in you any more at all. So the 2 women grinding the millstone together is a picture of grinding the manna to make cakes of it, but the one left will be in the dead carcass with the birds of prey hovering over and part of mystery Babylon. So if you read Numbers chapter 11 verses 7 and 8, it says, now the manna was like coriander seed and its appearance like the appearance of Bethlehem. Verse 8, the people went about and gathered it, ground it on millstones, or beat it in mortar, and cooked it in a pot, and made cakes of it, and his taste was as the taste of cakes baked with oil. Okay, so now let's read Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 6. Do not take a pair of millstones, not even the upper one, as security for a debt, because that would be taking a person's livelihood as security. So, a hand mill and its upper grindstone represented a person's means of life. All right, so the grindstone had an upper stone and a lower stone, and in between that gray, the upper stone would move. Even now, people have got stone grinders. If you see, the upper stone is that millstone, all right, which grinds uh, the grain or the masala, as we say, crushing it. Okay, so that's a picture over here saying that do not take these means of livelihood, all right, to give it as a debt, all right, because your livelihood will be lost. Okay, so seizing either of these two millstones would deprive the entire family of its daily supply of bread. A hand mill consisted of two stone slabs, an upper millstone and a lower stone. It was used for grinding grain between the two stones to make flour with which to bake bread. So the grain was normally placed upon the bottom stone, and the grinder moved the upper stone back and forth over the fixed horizontal stone. So grinding grain for bread was essential because it was a source of the man's daily food and also his livelihood. Thus, to take and hold a man's hand mill or even an upper millstone as a pledge against the payment of a debt would be to deprive his family of the means of making flour or bread. So, to do so would be taking a life in pledge. So, the stones were heavy and required more than one person to grind. So, the one gathered is the elect, and the woman left behind, unable to grind, is bound by her pledge to eat carnal bread, and that's where the dead carcass is, the assembly given over to Hashatan. All right, so it's also figurative of two women. They are the huge stone they are grinding together. One is gathered, one is left, unable to grind. That's the reason no more sound of the millstone within the assembly. All right, no more grinding of the true bread. All right, what is left is worms. The manna will breed worms over there, dead carcass. That's a picture. I hope you can relate it to Torah. Okay. So, in summary, we need to be discerning to understand what is happening in the times we are living in. Matthew 24 and 25 is the Olivet Discourse, letting us know latter course summing up to the end. The signs we need to look at and discern and wait for the little season, looking towards the coming of the Adon, Yahusha Elohim, and we are nourished away from the face of the serpent for times, and dividing of time of 1260 days, or 42 months, or 3.5 years, figurative little season that is mentioned, which is a symbolic time frame for the judgment to be meted out to the corporate body, which has become the whore mystery Babylon, the mother of all harlots. There is a war of breads going on in the corporate body, and the various parables show us how Hashatan slowly crept in the assembly to bring in his tares, and this is the time when the wheat and the tares are being separated. We need to look up, for our redemption draws near. Look up, beloved. So I leave you with this message, that if you are experiencing or trying to experience a supernatural experience in the corporate body, all right, forming camps, forming fellowship groups, all right, then you are mistaken. All right, you need to be outside. That's where our Mashiach also was impaled. And that's all this points out. Mashiach is leading us. Remember what was measured, the outer court. It says, leave out the outer court. Do not measure it, for the Gentiles will trample. So these Gentiles are nothing but these so-called carnal believers, not able to discern the signs of the times. We are measured in the temple in Mashiach, where we wait, and we are in that little season already. If we are able to understand the abomination of desolation, and by the things that we see around us happening, all right, then we are at the doors. Hallelujah. May Yahusha Elohim barak you. Shalom.